This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it's time for Avoid the Maze, your journey through life. My guest today is Richard Kraft. And Richard, when I read your bio, there was so much that resonated with me, except for the first line where you talked about getting laid off 9 months into the pandemic as a healthcare worker. Um, Even today, we don't have enough healthcare workers, and we certainly did not need a shortage during the pandemic. But there's a lot more there. So take us on your journey because I have a feeling if I can resonate with what you went through, we have listeners who are saying, oh, it's not just me.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. Well, my journey started, I would say, this kind of leg of the race, if you will. I'm 48. It started, roughly about 2009. I ended up working in a level one trauma center in the emergency room, nights in downtown Austin. And I kind of felt like at that point, like I'd applied for a different job, but they handed me to a different department. But I absolutely fell in love with it. And it was kind of one of these things of I felt like healthcare chose me. Now, keep in mind, my mom has worked in healthcare since I was 10. She worked for the hospital I was born at, and I worked in the early 2000s in the emergency room there. And that led me to go back to college. And I thought I wanted to be a physician. And then I took healthcare law and realized I would never be able to be the kind of physician I wanted to be because administration comes with all the rules. And so I kind of still did some of the requirements. I was like a health and kinese major with all the pre-med requirements. And I went into personal training, and somewhere along the way, I got into healthcare. And, I felt like it chose me, and it was very fitting because I've always been kind of a server, and I've been in a service related industry kind of my whole life. Whether it was a trainer, in the food industry, it was really always about making others happy, or being kind of a value add to their life.
Sure.
And, you know, I ended up really enjoying that job, but there was no vertical or lateral movement. And my wife was like, well, why don't you go back to graduate school and get your master's? And I was really kind of like done with school, didn't really want to, but I applied and got in and did this hybrid program where you kind of go for a week with your cohort and you do this intense week. I mean, some are 12-hour days, and then you go back to your respective states and cities, and um, your cohort. And so when you get in groups for projects, you know who they are, and you do like 15 months of that. And at that same time, I'm a new father of roughly a 1-year old. And I had applied for some jobs closer to my family and closer to my wife's family. So if we wanted some help with our child. And lo and behold, I get a call one morning right after Christmas on the way home because I work nights. And it was for an interview. And I just happened to be going um, up to my classes like that January.
Sure.
And so I arranged an interview at the same time and ended up getting that job. And so, all of a sudden, I'm, father of a 1-year old in graduate school, relocating, starting a new job, hopping from doer to leader or follower to leader because I was a senior clerk in the ER, and now I'm going into a management role, where I'm going to manage an ambulatory clinic and eventually ended up with two. And so it was a huge transition, and I sacrificed a lot. I worked really hard, and I planned on rising through the ranks, and it just kind of didn't happen. It's a very small town. Um, and I knew this kind of growing up. It's very cliquish. Like, did you go to the right schools? Did you
Right.
go to this? And if you did, sometimes you can kind of get a little bit of favorable treatment, it seems. But then there's also like this component of each time you move up, there's less spots. So it's more competitive as well. and I always thought like, hey, I'm gonna, um, work my way through the ranks. And by the time my daughter gets ready to go to college, I'll be able to be wherever she needs me to be, and I'll have flexibility and money and this and that, the other. And, I'm trucking along and um, I'm getting more responsibility, participating in committees and whatnot. And then, of course, the pandemic happens. And, being a healthcare worker, you're like, hey, we're front lines, we're needed. And so we shut down our urgent care, but kept open our family practice. And it was challenging, but it was, I thrive on challenge. I love to succeed. I love to win, find ways to win, and problem solve. So I really enjoyed it. But, there come this time where, we'd close our urgent care and laid off some people there. And then they started shrinking kind of the management. And, there's a whole backstory to how like my clinics got moved to this different market that we bought. And I ended up with these different directors and whatnot. And, eventually kind of what happened was, the director I had come from this different market and she had people she worked with for 7, 8 years. And when it came time for layoffs, they were like, she's going to keep her people that she's worked with for 7 years. And they laid me off and kind of shrunk the management and promoted one person because they're cutting out my salary. So now they can promote this person and give two people a little bit of extra money. And, they gave me a good severance package. So at the time, I wasn't super happy. Um, and it was kind of partially due to some of the cliquish stuff. And, when we combined with this bigger system, and we went through these job descriptions and we're like, should you be like a practice manager 2 or 3? And, I should have been a 3, because I was a 3 before. And then they put me to a 2 and, and I was like fighting with HR and VPs and directors on, hey, I have this many people I manage. I have this many clinics. Like, this is what I should be. And this was kind of a discussion right before the pandemic. And then when the pandemic happened, I was told like, hey, I heard you're making like a ruckus up at corporate
Ah,
because my director had kind of left to this other job and then came back. And I had sent this email to the VP and HR when she left. And they were like, kind of like this whole, like, you should be thankful you have a job, because it's the pandemic and we shut down urgent care and we're laying people off. And so, it was kind of this whole thing. And so when I got laid off, I was kind of like, well, I'll take the severance. I was looking for another job either way because, I felt like they were being unfair to me. But there was kind of this, you know, I enjoyed that little bit of severance and kind of what it allowed. But then kind of once things started to sort of get back to normal, you know, there was kind of this, and things set in, there was a little bit of resentment. And it was this, I used to always tell people in team meetings, like, as caregivers, I don't think it's what we do. I think it's who we are. And so our identity is tied to it a little bit. And like I'd mentioned before, I was always in some sort of service related
sure.
industry. And so that layoff, really tore my identity down, um, ripped the rug right out from under me. And then that's when the struggle began. And, you know, I didn't deal with it well, and I drank too much and was angry. And it took a lot of like journaling, deciding, kind of going in circles, deciding to stop drinking and all these things to finally come out of it. But, I'd been Uber driving on the side to kind of make some income because I'd applied for some jobs and turned some down because they just weren't great. They were like, let's relocate further away from my family, my wife's family, and let's make less money than you made when you were laid off. I'm like, no thanks.
Yeah.
But, it was essentially driving around processing all this stuff, and it was kind of when I began to go kind of like a breakup. I was listening to a podcast and it's like forgiveness. And I was like, I need to forgive um this company, this organization, and especially once you kind of learn that the pandemic, what it all meant,
Right.
what it really was. And it's like, okay, forgive them and let's look at everything they taught you. And at this point in time, I was being encouraged to start a podcast and this and that, the other. And it's like, well, I've interviewed a lot of people. So for jobs within the clinic, that's a skill. P&Ls, streamlining things, processes, working with whether it's vendors, talking to people who might be in higher positions, like, when you're going and asking your CFO of a $7 billion organization for extra people, they want to know why you need it. And so I started to kind of turn it around and go, okay, like they taught me all this. I need to be thankful and I need to forgive them. And things kind of started to turn around. And, as I'm going through podcasting, it's kind of like a personal journal as it starts off, if you will. And then I start interviewing people and it kind of takes on a different life and shape. And I joined Podmatch and, it just kind of grows into this thing that it is. But during that process, I started to learn, I'm doing some self-development work and coaching. Um, I start to learn that, really my identity is I'm a kind, caring, and compassionate person. And I like to serve people, and I've always done it. It's just how I've done it has taken different shapes. I
Right.
was in the military. I worked in restaurants. I've worked in hospitals more than once. I was a personal trainer, and now I'm a podcaster. And even when I do Uber Eats, it's about helping those who either don't want to get out, you're making their life better, or, I pull up somewhere and there's a handicap van and I'm delivering, 100 pounds worth of dog food because they can't go get it themselves. And that's something I would probably do for free, but, I just happen to get paid for it. But and also someone asked me, hey, like if podcasting went away, like how would you feel? And I had to think about it like, I think I'm at peace. I know what my identity is, but podcasting allows me to reach a greater audience than um the two clinics I managed. I can touch more people this way, but if it went away, I would just find another way to serve. And so I realize, the truth of my identity is, hey, it was just maybe at the wrong location at the time. And I think kind of like any relationship, because that's what a business and transactional type thing is that, some relationships are for a season.
Right. Abs-
And so I think kind of, sitting through that discomfort, quitting drinking, making sure my headspace was clear, um, beginning to understand all that and work through the feelings, I came to understand who I am, what I'm about, and, should something like this happen again, I think I would be in a much better spot and save myself, a lot of heartache, headache, but also kind of have the mental stability, fortitude, and wherewithal to logically work through, hey, these are my core values. These are what I believe in. Now let's look at the set of skills I've got, new set of skills I've developed, and let's see where I can capitalize on it to, not only provide a living, but some fulfillment along the way.
Absolutely. And the sad part is, and I had this conversation with somebody, I think a little over a week ago, is that we aren't taught to think about what we need for ourselves and who we are. Um, when we're little children, our parents sort of tell us who we are
Mhm.
by either selecting our clothes, selecting our food, who we're going to play with, etc. Um, when I think back to what my parents taught me growing up. Um, they had a set of rules for my oldest brother. He was 8 years older than me and a male. They had a set of rules for my brother that was the middle child, and there was a set of rules for me. And I didn't see those differences until I got older. And when I got older, part of me was resentful. And I found out my brothers were resentful. But luckily, it didn't pull us apart. It brought us closer together so we could discuss these things. But similar to you, um, I was forced out of a job that I loved the job, hated the culture. So it sounds like that's where you work. Um, and because I hated the culture, I worked harder because I wanted to help the people that I was working for. Um, I was at a private college. I loved my students. I turned away students because it was not the right fit. And I got them to tell me why it wasn't the right fit instead of me saying, oh, no, you'll find the money. You can enroll, and yes,
Yeah.
you become a medical assistant and make $0. But I didn't because they also walked in with the same phrasing that you brought up is that you wanted to help people. They wanted to be connected to people. And they thought the only way they could do that was being a medical assistant or a nurse. And when the first thing they tell me is they don't like being around blood and they don't like touching people, it was like, but then
That's the
that's not how
job.
you be a nurse. There's other things you can do to help people. Let's figure that out.
It takes everyone, I went working in a level one trauma center, and it's like you have a trauma come in, and let's say they get rushed to CT, and you need that housekeeper to come in and willy-nilly get everything kind of situated. That way, when they wheel the patient back in, things are kind of in order and you can make next steps.
Yes.
And, I've seen, sad to say, but somebody's ear come in wrapped in a bio bag and some tissue because it was separated from them, and they go to CT and maybe the housekeeper threw the ear away. We couldn't find it. Um, and so whether you're a housekeeper or the physician, it matters, and it takes everybody on the team. Everybody has a role, and how you treat them and show them respect um, matters, because not, these things don't happen alone in a
Right.
silo.
Exactly. And that's it truly at all businesses if we're honest and if they're run properly.
Hmm.
Um, Now understanding more of your story, how you got laid off makes sense in today's business world, even though it does not make human sense.
Yeah.
And we see this all over because what happened with me was um, I I wear hearing aids. I had a tumor in my ear, lost the hearing in that ear, but the doctor started operating on the wrong ear. So, hey, lucky me. Um, and I didn't make a big deal of it with my coworkers, but I found there were certain things I wasn't hearing properly. And so I was honest with them. You can't walk down the hall and whisper to me. I'm not going to hear a whisper. Okay.
Right.
Wait till we get to your office or my office and we'll have a conversation. But instead, they would continue to do this. And then it'd be Karen didn't do something or Karen doesn't understand. And uh, being upset about the culture and everything else, I got called into uh, HR one day and they said to me, you know what? You really should take medical leave. Just you've got 6 weeks, maybe you can adjust your hearing aids, maybe you can do all these things. And I said, no, I'll work around it. Well, no, they forced me. 2 days later, I was told that I had abandoned my job.
Mm.
So again, here I was so connected to what I wanted to do. But it was my youngest son who said to me, Mom, if you had your choice right now, what would you do? This was over 10 years ago. And I looked him straight in the face and I said, I'd be a podcaster. And he looked at me, goes, what do you know about podcasting?
I
I,
listened to a lot of them.
yeah, I said, I will learn. I was a communications major. I
Right.
wanted to be on TV. I wanted to report the news. And he said, okay, go ahead and do it. And I said, no, I can't. You know, depends on me to be, breadwinner. I can't do that. And I came home and I told my husband, he goes, I guess we have to adjust our life, don't we? Not what I was expecting him to say, but both he and my son knew how miserable I really had been. So kudos to your wife for putting up with what you went through. Uh,
Oh, it was rough, believe me, and it wasn't all pleasant. And we've made headway and got through the storm of it all because, the thing is that what was different from my situation and yours is that um I don't know that they could see how miserable I was or they ignored it, but they had to have known because my wife was also one who told me like to stick up for like what are you getting paid, how you should be
sure,
classified and all that. But there was this, like I said, I had applied for about 300 jobs, received some offers, and surprisingly received a lot of nothing. But it was kind of this push to go back into like you have a master's in healthcare administration, you need to utilize it and yada, yada, yada. And so that was this huge source of like, but I don't want to go back into that because the culture and, it's not just this hospital system, it's going to be every one of them because the system is broken. And I'll tell you, it wasn't until it took almost a year of being into podcasting and the consistency, the work effort. I think her seeing that I dedicate the same time and effort that I would to my previous job when I was taking 2 a.m. phone calls. But, I describe it as once she was kind of supportive, um, because I call it like energy, measure the
absolutely.
energy in a hospital, measure the energy at a concert. They're different. But if two energies are going apart, but once she was on board and support and the energies go forward together, then it kind of just started to grow and blossom. And my life gets better. I'm a better father. I'm a better husband. Our relationship is better. Um, I made, what was it, number 12 on the leaderboard for Pod Match, and she actually gave me a high five when I showed her. And so, that support makes a huge difference. So I'm thankful that your husband was like, hey, getting that must have been like, because you realize that kind of your layoff or whatever was a blessing in disguise.
Well, and it was, but it took me, like you, a long
Because
time.
you may not have left if so. And
Oh,
I always say, guess what? If I'd made director, which would have been more money, there would have been that much more pressure to get back to that comfort level of lifestyle.
yeah,
And I
exactly,
realize now, like, hey, the fact that I never, like, let's say, made the jump from 70 to 100 grand was probably a blessing because, you know, I would have been forced to kind of go back and pursue that and maintain that lifestyle and would have been miserable.
exactly. And it's funny because I had gone back to school to get my master's, um, because the college basically, recommended it. And oh, don't worry, once you have it, it's
Yeah.
gonna go right up. Um, and I switched campuses. Now, the first campus I was at, I really had tremendous amount of support. The culture was totally different. My job was a little harder there,
Hmm.
but there was support. And I didn't realize how important that was. I moved to the suburban campus, it was a little bit closer to home. And I was competing, or they wanted me to compete with others in my department. And I don't compete. I compete with myself.
Right.
And it was enough that I was working, you know, 10, 12-hour days, even though they didn't want me to. And I wasn't getting paid extra. But there was a student who needed me, or there was something else that needed to be done that maybe somebody else in the department didn't do. That's just my personality. I want to get it done so nobody is upset in the department. And I didn't realize how much I was hurting myself. Nobody else cared. If things didn't get done, they didn't get done. And
Yeah.
that was the first thing my husband said to me when I decided to move forward. He said, do not kill yourself doing this. And my first reaction was, well, how am I going to do that? It took me up until last year to realize that's what I was doing. I was doing anywhere. Now, not only do I have my show, but I produce shows because I have a group under New Cleveland
Hmm.
Radio. So I was producing for them, helping them get guests, producing my shows. And I wanted my show to be so good. I was interviewing individuals 6, 7 times a week. And I put the show right up. I ended up getting COVID. And I said to my husband, I got to work. They won't know I'm sick. He said, you can't even make it into the room. How are you going to do this? And I tried. I tried through 2 shows and I finally said, no, I got to go take a couple days off. That's all I did was a couple of days. But it truly were the people from Podmatch, the top tier, who said to me, stop killing yourself.
Set
And
boundaries.
and but I have to tell you, once I did, there are a lot of people out there who are now very angry. What do you mean you don't have any time slots? What do you mean? Are you that big? And it's like, no, but I need to live. I need to
Well,
breathe.
you have life. Well, once I was kind of doing it on my own, and then Alex reached out and I attended one of the events. It was right before that. And then I joined Podmatch, and all of a sudden interviews like flooded in.
Yep.
Before I could even finish my profile setup, I had people trying to match me. And so what I did was I decided right there, like, I remember him saying, like, well, you your job as a podcaster is to put out episodes consistently, and whatever's sustainable, that's what you do. And so as soon as everything started flooding in, I said, okay, I have to get a grip on this chaos. And so I arranged it kind of like a hospital schedule. I go, I'm going to give myself 36 hours a week, and I have them set up kind of like when my daughter's in school and whatnot. And I try to have a hard time that when my wife and daughter arrive, if I'm not picking her up from school, that it gets shut down
Yep.
unless it's just something extenuating, or I put a late interview from across the pond or overseas. And then I try to make that time theirs. And then I also include, my in-between time of working out, but then the rest is back office stuff and
Right.
research and pod match and blah, 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 editing and batching. But yeah, I think for me, especially coming from like a kitchen background and emergency room, working in those twice, organized chaos, I was always a strong I always worked expo, and I worked some super large incidents that required me to kind of organize and keep the charge nurse like ahead of the situation. And so I'm good at taking a lot and breaking it down to small, like first things first, let's get on the basics and start going, and we'll chew it down as we go. And so I think I just took that kind of same approach, because I knew it needed to be sustainable. And when I did, over the summer, I was able to there was at some point that I got so many and I wanted to keep everything relevant that I bumped myself up to 2 episodes a week. Um, and I've got that going. And so now I'm standing up a private accountability group to kind of go with the podcast. And after, it took about a year, but got that rhythm down. And I know how I keep, batch, post, generate clips, and it's freed up my time. And I learned so much about editing only to learn that I wanted to edit less.
Yeah.
You know, once I got transcription editing too, I was like, I figured it all out and then was like, okay, I think I did an episode and I was like, because I was a guest on one and he's like, I don't edit much really. I just kind of go straight from StreamYard to here. And I said, you know, and I told my audience, look, I'm going to leave it more natural because, the values in the content and the conversation, I'm not editing a motion picture here. So,
Exactly.
you know, it is what it is. I don't need fancy tricks and this and that, the other. And, I can produce clips with captions and whatnot, but, I'm not going overboard with something elaborate. It's more about the content and the words than it is about the show or the visual.
And my shows and the ones that I produce, when I bring somebody on, that's exactly what I share with them. You want this to be a conversation like you and I are either on the phone or you're sitting in my office, I'm in your office. And if we say accidentally the wrong thing, it's like, no, I really didn't mean that. And then
Yeah.
I never wanted it to be scripted. And I was working with a coach not too long ago who said, Karen, I've got all these great ideas for you. Okay. And it's only going to cost you X amount for me to help you. Okay. But give me those ideas. And he started telling me the ideas. And I said, I don't want to do that. Well, you can hire somebody to edit. You can hire somebody to, I said, you're right. I could. But I'm at an age where I'm doing it for me to get my voice out, to keep me strong, because it's easy to slip back into the, oh, woe is me. I said, and also to offer other people the opportunity to hear that it may not be easy to do what you want to do, but if you don't try, then you're going to have regrets. And when my mother passed away 8 years ago, the biggest regret she had was that she never went to college.
Hmm.
And I had never heard that in her. She was 96 and a half years old, never heard it my whole life. And I sat by her bedside so sad because she could have gone back to school. Okay. Instead, my mother took job after job and she built herself up.
Right.
She was doing things that she didn't want to do. And I know if she would have said to my father one day, I want to go back to school and become a teacher, he would have said, okay, go.
Oh, one of my favorite bakeries around here is it's opened by a woman. I guess maybe she was in corporate. I could be misspeaking. All I know is at a later age, maybe mid late 40s, early 50s, which is like my age. For whatever reason, she stopped doing whatever she was doing and she actually went to like the culinary pastry program at the junior college and then opened up this bakery and they sell everything's kind of like cronut based, but it's called Laurel and Pearl and they do beignets on Tuesday and um they're expensive a little bit, but it's worth it
Yeah.
because, the layering, the croissant dough takes 2 days. It's a process and it's worth it. The service is good. The product is good. It's local. And I love that. And I love the story of, you know, she was at whatever, whatever it is, unfulfilled. I mean, the people I do business coaching with, um, Next Level University and Alan Lazarus, and I went group coaching and then business coaching. I mean, he made a boatload of money at one point and left that because he wasn't fulfilled, and that's what I always try to think about is, I've had money, I've had less money. I seem to be happier when I have had less money. Um, and it's not really that it's less money. I think what it is I'm in a space where I just don't want anything and I don't need anything. I have everything I want and everything I need. I can podcast, I can play guitar, I can listen to music, I can go to the gym, go for a walk. Those are watch a good show. I don't need or want much more than that.
I
And I
totally
think
understand that.
it's partially that keeps um so you don't need a lot of money for it. Now, yes, I would like to make some additional money just so I could, you know, whether it's do more good with it, do things for my family and whatnot. I think that's natural. But in terms of do I have what I need? Absolutely. And I think in a lot of those times that I've experienced what I consider happiness, that's always been the case as I was doing what I loved, like especially when I cooked. And when I wasn't cooking, I was exercising, playing guitar, socializing, going to the beach, just everything I did, I enjoyed. And it's kind of the same way now. I wake up, have my coffee, journal, read a daily Bible passage, do some back office stuff. I get to have some conversations today as a guest and one as a host later, go to the gym and then, spend time with family when they come home. And um, yeah, it's good and it's simple and it doesn't require much. And it's because I think, I keep that want and need pretty simple.
And it's about choices. And,
Hmm.
as humans, we can make those choices. Um, and as I tell some of my clients, if you want so much more, that's your choice, but then you have to make the choices to get there. Okay. You can't sit back waiting for it to happen.
Yeah.
Um, you
And I'm
know,
about experiences too over things.
right.
Way, way much more. I mean, things are things. We do this consignment sale every fall and spring, and we're just trying to get rid of stuff. Like things just accumulate and hold you down. Like, I remember being in the military, it's like pack light, move fast, keep what you need. I mean, if you think about it, for me, I wear the same shorts, the same shirts to the gym when I go Uber, when I go out. I only wear jeans if my wife makes me because we're going somewhere decent. But, a lot of whether it's my microphone, the things on my desk, my backpack that I take with me, there's a few essential items that I use all the time that I need. But outside of that, a lot of it's just stuff we allow
No,
to creep into our
exactly.
life and weigh us down. And then all of a sudden, if you do want to go or get up and leave, you know, we've had a storage unit since 2015, just since we moved from Austin. It's just like we want to get rid of that. We're trying to downsize that. It's like this stuff bombards us, and because we're led to believe that stuff equals success.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, you live in a warm climate, so you can
Hmm.
wear shorts. Okay. Um,
I wear shorts even when it's cold. I'm about
oh,
comfort.
oh, so where in Texas are you?
I'm in East Texas. I am dead center on I-20, right in between Dallas and Shreveport, Louisiana.
Oh, okay. Because my son is in Arlington, Texas.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm about an hour and a half, 2 hours
Yep.
from there.
And
But
it's funny because anytime somebody says Texas, oh, maybe your son knows so and so, and it's like, Texas is a big state.
especially the DFW, I grew up, so I know it more, but my wife's more from the Houston area, and every time we're driving, like I took her to Fort Worth for her birthday. and she'll get them confused. Well, is it near Six Flags? And so I use the dash as a map, and I go, look, if this air vent is Dallas, I go, and my air vent is Fort Worth. I go, Arlington, Bedford, Grapevine, all that is the little stereo in between. I go, that's kind of how it's arranged. And people don't realize I had a friend who used to live in Dallas, and we were going to Arlington, and I remember, I don't know if somebody asked like how long it was going to be. Is it far? And he goes, well, we don't call it Farlington for nothing. And that's somebody who lives in Dallas,
Yeah,
and that's, the DFW area kind of includes Arlington there in the middle.
right.
People don't realize that, it's a big area combined.
Yeah, when I have visited him twice. He first lived in Fort Worth. He's now in Arlington. Eventually, he will be in Dallas. He works for the WNBA, so he's
Oh,
a
cool.
busy, busy young man. And thanks to him, this is why I'm doing what I do. He
I
noticed it
used
in
to
me.
I used to work with a VP supply guy, and his son is a college basketball coach for Abilene Christian University, I believe.
Okay,
But him and his wife both actually coach basketball, but the women's team. And so I was very enamored kind of with that, people who get that opportunity, because I guess it's kind of a choice. But, in healthcare, I managed mostly women. There were not very many of us men in my departments, maybe three of us. So I could imagine, it's managing 26 women was challenging. So I could imagine getting them to do team sports um, that are, with some aggression is probably a challenge on its own, but you probably learn a lot about communication and especially with females.
right. And he's always wanted to be in sports. It's been
Hmm.
his love ever since he was 2 years old. He worked his way to be where he is. And again, we can make choices, okay? And we choose our happiness, okay? Um, so I'm very impressed with what you've done. And I'm looking forward to following you more on Podmatch. And for those of you listening and you've heard the name Podmatch, for those of us who are podcasters or guests on podcasts, um, Podmatch is like our dating service.
Hmm.
Um, but it really is so much more
Yeah.
because I have learned so much from all my guests. And, some I look at them and I go, okay, well, that's the way that you want to grow your business. And that's great. This is how I'm going to grow mine. And you know what? We all get along. We
Yeah.
all get along. So if we could take this model from Podmatch and take it out into the world, oh, what a beautiful world we'd be living in. We,
Yeah, because I always say that, we're so much more alike than we are different, because men of the house is like men of the Waffle House, because I was sitting next to two men at the counter. We're by ourselves doing our thing, having breakfast, and it's like, hey, what's his story? What's his story? And the pod match thing is similar, is like we get to connect of people, like we think they have an interesting story or something I would like to know about, and we get to have this exchange of energy, this exchange of time, which is our most important asset, because none of us can get any more of it, and we don't know when it's going to end. And so, having that opportunity and to realize like how we're similar, how we're different, um, how your background was. I had a conversation with um, a guy who's from Germany but lives in New Zealand, and he's at an age and I'm at an age, but he was growing up after World War II, and it's like, countries that were sworn enemies, and now we're having conversations because we both struggled with alcohol,
right.
and we both want that message and that healing, um and that's the true power of togetherness. Is we were fighting over dumb stuff then anyway, over kind of monopolizing and who wants to rule this or who wants more or who wants all the cookies in the cookie jar as
Right.
opposed to just going, hey, there's enough for all of us and let's share it and enjoy it and kind of like pod match, have these conversations and take pieces of enlightenment from each other. And, if it doesn't resonate, then you leave that behind. But
Exactly.
um, there's always somebody out there who needs to hear the conversation we're hearing that day. And um, that's kind of why we do it.
I love it. Well, and I have to thank you for wearing Doug on your shirt today. Um, he is one of my favorite cartoon characters. My son grew up with Doug, and even at his age today, at age 34, when he needs, some nostalgia, he will watch Doug. And
Well, my 22-year-old cousin gave this to me.
I
So
love it. I love it.
everybody compliments me on it. So I'm always like, oh, yeah.
Well, now you got to go watch the cartoons
I
because
know.
they are they're really good. And for a mom who would sit with her young one and watch them, um, most cartoons I never liked, but Doug I do. So thank you very much. Have a great day and keep up all the good work.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. It was lovely talking to you. And
Thank you. Bye bye
yeah.
now.
All right. Bye-bye.